Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Huddersfield Planning Subcommittee. Item number 1, membership of the subcommittee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm substituting today for Councillor Charles Greaves, who sends his apologies.
I'm Councillor Anwar. I'm substituting Councillor Sokol, who sends his apologies today.
Item number 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Do we agree that they're an accurate record? Do we have a mover? Yeah. And a second? Got that. Yeah. Item number 3, declarations of interest and lobbying. Councillor Lukic, can we start with you?
I've no lobbying. I suppose there were some passers-by at one of the sites this morning, but I didn't really hear anything they said, so nothing from me.
Yes, I have. I won't be speaking on the application for Clifton Avenue. So I shall remove myself from the chamber. Okay?
Nothing to declare.
Nothing to declare.
Nothing to declare, Chair.
Nothing to declare, Chair.
Chair, not lobbying, but it is the Cranbourne application, so agenda item 7. We've actually just bumped into each other. I know Mr Hinchcliffe, who's part of the architecture team, but no lobbying whatsoever and no discussion over the application.
Yeah, similar to Councillor Lukic, some residents at one of the sites, but no, nothing to declare other than that.
Nothing to declare.
Yeah, page 103, the application, Dorchester Road. Mr Sandhu, the applicant, has contacted me on text a couple of times about his application, but I've not given him any advice or guidance when he discussed the application. Thank you.
And I also have a declaration on application 91676 at Mead Street, page 119. I won't be participating at all in that item agenda, and I'll be leaving the meeting. So I think at this point, would it be wise for us?
Have you clarified why?
I know the applicant. Would it be advisable at this point to elect somebody for the last item agenda, because it is a...
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Councillor Homewood for that particular item.
Item number 4 then, admission of the public. There's nothing on this agenda that would need us to go into a private session. Item 5, deputations and petitions.
None received.
Thank you. Item 6, public question time. No, none. Okay then, item 7 is the first application, page 9. Sorry, confirm that we have been on the site visits.
So it's item 13, isn't it? It's the first one.
I think, okay, yeah, item 13.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Ellie Worth and I'm the case officer for this application. The application relates to land adjacent to Cranbourne in Wooldale and is for the demolition of the existing outbuildings and the erection of 3 detached dwellings. The application has been brought to committee at the request of Councillor Firth due to concerns in terms of parking and drainage and due to the substantial number of representations received. Here is the location plan. The site is unallocated on the Kirklees local plan and forms an open piece of grassland. There are existing outbuildings to the north and west, so these are here and here, which are to be demolished. To the east is safeguarded land, as shown on this right-hand side photo. So this is the site here, and then you can see the extent of the safeguarded land, which could come forward in the future. Here is the proposed site plan. As mentioned, 3 detached dwellings are being proposed, all of which would be constructed from natural materials. To the front, the dwellings would benefit from driveways along with an access which would adjoin Clifton Avenue. So this would be along here. The access already serves the host property, Cranbourne. However, should this application be approved, they will take their vehicle access from along here. To the rear of the site, each dwelling would benefit from private amenity space. Here are the plans for plot 1. The dwelling would provide 4 bedrooms and would have a single-storey front projecting gable to serve as a garage. This plot would be the closest to the safeguarded land, and therefore measures have been included to ensure that the works would not prejudice the use of this land in the future. This includes the house being set in from the boundary and for all future ground floor side openings to be fitted with obscure glazing. Here is the plans for plot 2. This is the middle house on the site. This would also be a 4-bed property, and the garage in this case would be integral. It's been designed with a both hip and a gable roof form, which fits the surrounding area. Here are the plans for plot 3. This is the dwelling that would be the closest to the properties along Town End Road. This has been designed with a gable and has a single-storey attached garage. This is also a 4-bed property. Solar panels will also be integrated on the side or rear roof slope in order to provide renewable energy. Here are some photos from within the site. So as you can see on screen, this outbuilding is to be demolished, and members will have seen this also on the site visit today. You can clearly see that 2 cars would be able to pass, and like I mentioned earlier, this access will only be used for the application site, so for the 3 dwellings proposed. Here is a photograph from within the site. So as you can see, it is just open grassland adjacent to Cranbourne, which is the rendered dwelling here. It's important to note that their amenity will be protected and this hedge will be continued. Here are the photos looking towards, so this is a view looking onto Ingledale Drive. We couldn't see that today, obviously, because the trees and everything I had overgrown, but this is the relationship. And then this just shows the properties to the rear of Town End Road. Also, these structures will be removed. Here is a site section to show the relationship in which the nearest plot, so plot 3, would have with the closest properties on Town End Road. It's important to note that the dwelling will be built further away than the existing outbuilding. However, we note that the dwelling would be greater in height. Nonetheless, 17 metres would be retained from the nearest rear elevation, which is this one, to the closest side elevation of the 2-storey house. There will also be 13.5 metres retained from the garage. In terms of principle of development, the site is unallocated on the Kirklees local plan and is proposed at an appropriate density in line with the Home Valley neighbourhood plan. In terms of visual amenity, the dwellings would have a traditional appearance and, as mentioned, would be constructed from natural materials. Appropriate separation distances would be achieved to boundaries and between the dwellings, and therefore officers do not consider the scheme to result in a cramped form of development. The dwellings are quite loud, but it is noted that they are comparable to the existing dwellings within the vicinity, especially with them being 2-storey in height. In terms of residential amenity, appropriate separation distances can be achieved to existing surrounding properties. This is in line with the Kirklees House Builders SPD. There would also be no material impact upon the future amenity of Cranbourne, as outlined previously, as a boundary hedge, as shown here, would be installed. From a highway safety point of view, appropriate levels of on-site parking are being proposed along with a suitable access. Sweat paths can also be seen on the plan, which can show that a fire attendant can manoeuvre safely within the site. However, I will just now pass you on to a highways colleague who will just elaborate on these points in more detail.
Through you, Chair. Ryan Kinder, Highway Development Management. To further summarise the highway section of the report, Clifton Avenue is unadopted along its length from the junction of Town End Road. Given the width of this road, which is circa 6 metres, it would be sufficient to accommodate an additional 3 dwellings on this occasion. The existing dwellings have arrangements in place for the collection of waste. It is assumed that this will be extended to accommodate the proposed development. In terms of the 1997 refusal on highways grounds, a 4.5 metre access could not be achieved. And this was in a different location to the proposed. In addition, emergency vehicle access could not be demonstrated either. This can be achieved on this particular proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Through you, Chair, thank you. Just going back now, in terms of drainage, a drainage strategy has been submitted as drainage was a concern to local residents. This has been reviewed by the Council's lead local flood authority and Yorkshire Water. The findings show that a connection can be made into a combined sewer with a discharge rate being restricted to 3.5 litres per second, avoiding a problematic drain raised in concerns by residents as part of the publicity period. This discharge rate is the lowest rate possible without causing any blockages. In terms of foul drainage, this will go into a shared sewer whereby the developer has the right of connection. There would be no further runoff from the development proposed, as the raining which will run down from the field onto the site will be intercepted by the permeable hard standing, which will then go through into the attenuation tank and will be slowly released. Drainage at Cranbourne is also unaltered as part of this development. Lastly, in terms of ecology, back boxes are required in order to seek a net gain. These would be on each dwelling. 40 representations have been received as part of the consultation periods for the scheme. These concerns have been covered in detail with officer comments within the committee report. Therefore, given the amendments made to the scheme to reduce the size and scale of the dwellings, to introduce more soft landscape into the front of the site, and given the submission of a drainage strategy to show that there would be no further impact upon the surrounding area, officers are recommending approval for the scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellie. Our first speaker, Nick Willock.
You can speak from your seat. Fine, speak from your seat.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Nick Willock, planning consultant for the applicant. This is a windfall housing site located in a sustainable urban location close to Home First Town Centre and regular bus services. Sites like these are important for the council's housing land supply because they contribute towards the windfall target of 4,500 homes and help prevent excessive greenbelt land being released in the future. The applicant's team have closely liaised with your officers throughout this case. In particular, the properties have been reduced in size in order to address initial concerns regarding visual and residential amenities. Officers are now happy the development fits in well with the local area and that there will be no detrimental overlooking or overshadowing to neighbouring houses. The properties will be constructed of natural stone and are designed individually, helping, as the committee report says, to reinforce local distinctiveness. The development will also help to raise standards of design in the area in accordance with the Home Valley Neighbourhood Plan and MPPF paragraph 135, which says that significant weight should be given to development which reflects local design policies. For highway matters, this development will provide betterment over the existing situation by providing a service vehicle turning area for bin lorries, fire engines, etc. It will provide more than sufficient parking for the residents and their visitors, therefore creating no parking issues on surrounding roads. As you'll have seen on site this morning, both Townend Road and Clifton Avenue accommodate two-way traffic movements, and visibility for vehicles manoeuvring between the two roads is good. By way of an update today, the large skip you may have seen this morning has been placed there just before the committee bus arrived. You'll have no doubt come across this situation before on site visits, so I'll leave you to judge whether or not that's a coincidence. Nevertheless, your highway officers support the development in all aspects. I would add just one point to Ellie's point about drainage. We are putting a storm flow attenuation tank in of 32 cubic metres under the development to enable a restricted discharge of surface water during extreme fall events. So this will again provide betterment over the existing situation. Finally, the development provides electric charging points and solar panels, therefore also helping to fulfil policies relating to tackling climate change. We would therefore endorse the officer's recommendation, and myself and the architect are here to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Members, it's over to you. Councillor Davies and then Councillor Lukic.
Yeah, we did indeed visit this morning, a nice wet Home Firth morning. And for those who don't live in Home Firth who were complaining about the weather down there, I just don't understand that. But it was very worthwhile, actually, the site visit, because it gave us a clear view of some of the presentation, some aspects of the presentation and what you've just gone through. Certainly from my perspective, it's very clear that there absolutely isn't any overlooking or overshadowing. I think that's a key issue for me in such a constricted area. It does, when you look at it, for the sort of amateur eye, look at a small site, but clearly we can, you can fit 3 houses in there within the necessary level of density with the separation, which is great. Very impressed with the solar panels. Obviously, electrical points are becoming much more common, but certainly I would have been asking about solar panels or air source heating. That, I think, is a huge advantage. And particularly the points around the attenuation on drainage, again, seems to me a gain in that particular area. Finally, I think the design, certainly for, you know, as somebody who lives fairly local, the design seems to me to fit in with what we got then, seems to have good quality. And also, I have to say, the partnership between officers and the applicant has worked very well in terms of some of the changes. So I'm probably repeating some of the things that have already been said, but from my perspective, certainly I have no issues with this, but I'll let other members come in. But at this point, I'm quite prepared to move on the basis of other comments.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Lukic.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just ask Highways for a bit more detail on Clifton Avenue itself, how many dwellings it currently serves and how many vehicles, movements per day, because these are 3 dwellings, I think 3 new vehicles each, potentially adding 9 vehicles to that, and that street is not adopted, doesn't have any footways on it. So I'd just like a bit more from Highways on whether we're happy that it's a suitable standard to serve these dwellings with all the number of vehicle movements and the layout of that street the way it is. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Clifton Avenue currently takes in the circa of 6 dwellings, and that generates 4 vehicular two-way movements in the AM and PM peak periods. So this development will add an additional 2 this is per hour in the AM and PM peak periods, so that'll take you to 6 movements in the AM and PM peak periods. And that's considered acceptable for a development of this size. As reiterated, it's acknowledged as an existing 6 dwellings off an adopted road, but given this proposal is for only an additional 3 and not in excess of 5 new, is acceptable from Highways perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Councillor Homewood.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to second Councillor Davies's motion to move the officer recommendation. I'm happy with what we've heard in the application that we've seen today.
Thank you. Councillor Marchington.
Yeah, thank you for the presentations. I've got a couple of questions really. One's about, so I appreciate that the applicant and the developer are doing flood risk attenuation. And some of the issues we've had on other sites is about risk of flooding while the development takes place. So we've got any steps in place to make sure that if there is significant rainfall during the development period, that's not going to create issues for the local residents. And I think I appreciate the report from the Highways officer, and it's really the access from the development onto Town End Road, and whether, I know it's a relatively small development, but just some reassurance about the sight lines and stuff coming from an area that is quite, you do get a lot of vehicles parked in and around the area. So just a couple of reassurances on those, please.
Hi there. In terms of the drainage at other areas, we've been in communication with the team or the drainage team at the council, and they said that if there are any sort of concerns raised about the drainage issues in Home Firth, that the ideal way to deal with that would be to go directly to them. It's the flood management team at Kirklees. But in terms of this site, we're satisfied that it's been going to be dealt with adequately. So in terms of this, they're not looking to go into the combined sewer, which is considered problematic at the moment, and revisions have been made, so that's it's sort of avoiding that sewer. But in terms of is that satisfactory in terms of drainage?
It's just during development. I appreciate once the site's complete, the development's completed, you've got all the play. It's just, do you foresee any potential risks additional risks during the development period before all the drainage and sewage connections are made?
So yeah, in terms of the lead local authority, they're content with the information that they've seen so far, and if there are issues, then that they would have to be relayed to the drainage team. Yeah, that's correct.
Fine. Okay.
If you want to.
Through you, Chair. The boundary walls onto Town End Road for properties 2 and 1, which are each side of Clifton Avenue, they're only approximately 600 to 800 mil high. So visibility displays, sight lines can be achieved up and down Town End Road in that respect, and that's not to alter as a result of this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Councillor Sully-Richards.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed the site visits this morning. I had another engagement. On page 33, there's an officer comment about the biodiversity net gain. And I know that we are not obliged to provide 10% at the moment, but there are recommendations. Are these being taken up for the bird and bat boxes? And obviously bats do like to use hedgerows for navigation and feeding, so the more hedges, the better. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, just to come back on that, we are looking to attach a condition to state that a bat box shall be provided on each dwelling. You could also see on the site plan, the hedges around the site, they will be retained, which may be suitable for bats and birds. So whilst there's nothing in place for a 10%, we consider being a bat box on each dwelling to be appropriate in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Is there any further comments? Because we have a mover and a seconder for the application. I think we'll go to the vote then.
Right, so this is to approve the recommendation as outlined in the submitted report. I want to call out your name. You don't have to put your microphone on because it will be turned on for you. So, Councillor Lukic?
For.
Councillor McGuinn?
For.
Councillor Susan Lee Richards?
For.
Councillor Marchington?
For.
Councillor Anwar?
For.
Councillor Davis?
For.
Councillor Hawkins?
For.
Councillor Lawson?
For.
Councillor Homewood?
For.
Councillor Aller?
For.
Okay, so that's unanimous. So the office recommendation is agreed. So it's approved.
Next application, 2 Town End Avenue, page 37.
We need to get Councillor Firth back, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I am also the case officer for this application. This relates to 2 Town End in Wooldale, which is seeking permission for the erection of extensions to create a first floor to an existing bungalow and internal and external alterations. This includes raising the roof height, front and rear dormers and a side extension. Full measurements can be found within paragraph 3.1 of the committee report. Here is the location and site plan. Oh, apologies. The application has been brought to the subcommittee due to the number of representations received. These were 16. Here are the site location and site plan. The site is situated within an existing residential area whereby the dwellings along Townend Avenue appear to be bungalows and some of which are dormer bungalows. The site is unallocated on the Kirklees local plan. However, to the rear, which sits along here, is Walldale Conservation Area, so it has the potential to affect its setting. Here are the existing elevations and floor plans. So as mentioned, the dwelling as existing is single storey and benefits from a side extension, which is here and is shown down here on the floor plan. There is also an existing garage on site. This will retain as existing. However, the only difference is this would be finished in a render. Here are the proposed elevations. The roof would be increased by 0.8 metres along with the insertion of front and rear dormers. The new side extension would also be visible from the street scene, but would have the same footprint as the conservatory, which will be demolished. However, it will have the same eaves and ridge height as the host property. Here are the proposed floor plans. So as you can see, it would be a 3-bedroom property. Here are some photos from the site. So this is where access can be taken from. This is the extension to be demolished. This is looking to the rear of the site. And then this is taken to the front. Given its unusual orientation, it's kind of the front and side elevation, which is both visible from within the street scene. As you can see, the neighbouring property already benefits from a first floor extension, which was granted under by planning in 2019. In this case, amendments were sought to reduce the scheme originally submitted, which was somewhat similar to this property next door, to achieve something that was a little bit more sensitive to the site given its relationship with neighbouring properties. Here is the proposed site plan and artist impressions of what the development would look like. As mentioned, it would be more in keeping and sympathetic to the surrounding built form. More specifically, from a visual perspective, officers consider the amendments sought to be acceptable and the materials would retain in brick. This would ensure that the works would not have an undue impact upon the setting of Walldale Conservation Area. In terms of residential amenity, there would be some impact on neighbouring amenity, particularly number 2 and 4 Walldale Road. However, officers consider the majority of the impact to come from the existing dwelling and therefore the slight increase in overall height is not considered to be material. Nonetheless, this is covered in full detail within the committee report. The dormers, as shown on screen, would also be set from both side elevations. This will help take away some of the bulk and massing. No concern is raised from a highways perspective as the garage and driveway will be retained as existing, which is suitable for parking for at least 3 vehicles. This is acceptable in line with the Highways Design Guide SPD, which states that a 2 to 3 bedroom property should have at least 2 off-street parking spaces. As previously mentioned, all representations have been covered by officers within the committee report. As such, officers are recommending approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ellie. We have one speaker, Shauna Atkinson.
Hi. When we initially put our planning application in, we never envisaged the response that we received would be so negative and in some cases quite so personal. We engaged and worked with the planning officer to constructively address to the best of our ability concerns of our neighbours that from a material planning consideration. The new plans we drew up have been greatly reduced from the original ones, and we believe that we have mitigated and managed to strike a reasonable balance in mitigating the impact on neighbours' amenity by our proposal. I'd like to thank you for your time and thank our planning officer for the guidance throughout this process.
Thank you. Members, over to committee then. Councillor Homewood.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it was really useful to go on the site visit and look at the sort of property and the orientation. And thanks for the presentation as well, which I think giving us all the detail. I am, having been there and having looked at the plans, I'm slightly confused as to the level of opposition to it, because to me it seems quite a reasonable application, to be honest. I think obviously they've worked on getting to a reasonable proposal, reducing in size slightly, and looking at the property as it was is a little tired at the moment. So I would think that actually undertaking these works could improve the street scene, to be honest. And obviously the neighbouring property has a two-storey. It's two-storey, and I think that's been done as an extension. So, yeah, to me, I was quite comfortable with what's presented here and the officer recommendation to approve. So, Chair, I'm happy to move that we approve as the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Homewood, Councillor Hawkins, and then Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it's worth mentioning or putting on record in this meeting that if residents do have any objections to any application that comes to us, that this is the forum they should be coming to, not approaching us on site visits. At site visits, we have to go and view the sites impartially without bias to see the sites themselves. And if residents in the local area do have oppositions to any applications, it is this meeting they should be attending and not approaching us during those site visits. I think that's worth putting on the record. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, very similar comments to Councillor Homewood, so I won't repeat all of them. I think certainly one thing I will say, and it's very unfortunate, I think, for the applicants, by the sound of it, that they've had not just negative but personal comments, and I would hope that that doesn't become a feature of such planning applications, particularly as I agree with Councillor Homewood. When we went today to look at this, I was really struggling. I think a number of us struggling to see what the key problems were. It certainly doesn't seem to me that it would cause any significant issues or any issues at all in terms of any sort of overlooking or being out of character with the buildings. And in some senses is almost quite a modest change to that building. So I'd more than happy to second the proposal as well. And again, I'm very sorry in terms of the applicants, if they've had to experience any sort of personal discomfort through inappropriate comments being made to them.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Lukic.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I certainly think what we've got in front of us now is reasonable. Potentially some of the strength of feeling mainly bears on the original proposals, and I suppose, you know, at that sort of point, sometimes it can be hard to accept revised proposals that do, in this case, appear to address the issues that have been raised. But yes, the actual scale of the extension seems to me reasonable in relation to the original dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lukic. Is there any further comments from the committee? Because we have a mover and a seconder for the application. I think we'll go to the vote, Richard.
Right, so thank you. So this is to vote for approval of the application as outlined in the submitted report. So Councillor Lukic.
For.
Councillor Firth.
For.
Councillor McGuinn.
For.
Councillor Lee Richards.
For.
Councillor Marchington.
For.
Councillor Armour.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Hawkins.
For.
Councillor Lawson. Councillor Homewood.
For.
Councillor Oller.
For.
Okay, so that's unanimous. So the recommendation to approve has been granted.
Thank you. Next application, item number 15, page 59, 100 Birchincliff Hill Road.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Sam Cork and I'm the case officer for this application. The application is for outline permission for the erection of a single detached dwelling, and it's brought before Huddersfield Subcommittee for determination under the terms of the delegation agreement following a request from Ward Councillor Kyle Burke. The site comprises a plot of land located near the junction of Birchincliff Hill Road and Halifax Road and accessed by an unadopted shared track off Birchincliff Hill Road. Access and scale are being applied for in addition to the principle of development. The site plan shows that the new dwelling will be located on approximately the footprint of the existing outbuilding, which is to the right of this plan. And the internal layout is indicative only. It shows it to be two-storey and with the windows mostly facing west and south. 2 parking spaces will be formed in front of the dwelling and new turning head, plus 1 additional space here to serve the existing dwelling. 2 representations have been made, and which are both in opposition, which are commented on in the report. And these are the images of it looking first from down Halifax Road near the junction, and gets another one from above the site looking down and looking up the shared driveway towards the site of the proposed development. The site itself is unallocated and in a relatively sustainable location, and it is considered that although the access arrangements are somewhat tight, the internal access turning and parking arrangements shown are on balance satisfactory. And it is considered that in principle the erection of a dwelling here could be designed in such a way as it wouldn't detract either from the appearance or character of its surroundings nor from the setting of the nearby listed building, that row of 3 houses 98 to 102 Birchincliff Hill Road. It is considered, however, for the reasons set out in detail in the report, that the level of outlook from and natural light received by the main habitable room windows would be unsatisfactory. There are the constraints arising from the topography of the site. Any habitable room windows this elevation would face banking and the highway boundary wall, and would also be subject to high-level traffic noise. To the north, any windows would experience mutual overlooking with a window in this property here. And on the indicative scheme, the windows are in the west and southern elevations, and ground floor windows in the western elevation would have their outlook significantly obstructed by parked cars, or at most, if they were located towards this corner, they would only have an outlook towards a narrow landscape strip and the plot boundary, and rather than towards the main amenity space. And for the upper floor windows in this elevation, outlook would of course be better, but still not good. And any facing in the south elevation or near the corner would face a degree of overshadowing from the trees, which I'll return to in a minute. And I'll just put the photographs on again. Now, it should be noted that layout, internal and external layout are indicative only, but it is officers' considered view that the constraints of the site result in a situation whereby it would not be possible to design a scheme that would ensure an acceptable level of amenity for future occupants, which would make it contrary to the aims of Policy LP 24B, paragraph 30F of the National Planning Policy Framework, and Principle 6 of the House Builders Design Guide SPD. Under Policy 33 of the local plan, consideration must be given to direct effects on trees and indirect effects, that is, direct effects arising from root damage and construction, and indirect effects arising from conflicts with future amenity of residents leading to pressure to fell. Similarly, Principles 2 and 3 of the House Builders Design Guide require developers to illustrate how landscape opportunities have been used and to map out the constraints of the site, seeking the integration of existing green infrastructure. Now, the trees located to the south of the site are not covered by a tree preservation order, but they are collectively considered to make a positive contribution to the visual amenity of the area, and the Council should therefore seek to ensure their retention in line with Policy LP 33. The land upon which they grow lies within an urban green space allocation known as Hopkinson Recreation Ground, and also including the Lindley Methodist Churchyard. Paragraph 1939 of the local plan, forming part of the justification statement to policy LP 61 on urban green space, states that green spaces close to where people live are an essential component of the quality and local character of areas, providing visual amenity and wildlife value. The developer's intention, according to the latest tree survey, impact assessment and method statements submitted 6th of October 21, is to retain all trees. The officers have observed that the indicative footprint overlies the root protection zone of one tree, T1, and it would be replacing the existing building with a much more permanent, substantial and two-storey building, which is expected to need deeper foundations. While the report claims that few, if any, significant roots are likely to be found beneath the existing workshop, this is unproven, and whilst it proposes a no-dig construction method, only a generic diagram has been shown, so it has not been proven this would be an acceptable solution here. The applicant's assessment of the situation appears to demonstrate that the degree of shade cast by the trees, according to British Standard 5837 2012, is in reasonable levels, at least in their present condition. Notwithstanding this, it should be noted that 6 of the 7 trees are classed as semi-mature and are therefore expected to continue to grow. The proximity of the adjacent woodland would, in the longer term, be likely to give rise to considerable potential for conflict on account of shading and debris fall. Furthermore, most of the trees are sycamores, which are known to shed a sticky residue during the summer months, and this is likely to increase their nuisance value further. Again, it is noted that scale has been applied for in addition to principle of development, layout has not, but in practice, owing to the topographical and other constraints of the site, there is very little scope for changing the layout in such a way as the dwelling would not affect the trees or be affected by them. In summary, it is considered that there are serious unresolved concerns about both direct and indirect impacts upon the trees, which make a positive contribution to local amenity, and in the compatibility of the proposed development with the long-term retention. The arboricultural officer was reconsulted on the latest tree survey and impact assessment and still recommends refusal of the application. The development is therefore deemed to be in conflict with the aims of policy LP 33 of the local plan and principle 3 of the House Builders Design Guide. Finally, no ecological information has been submitted with the application. The site itself would appear to have little habitat value, but the adjacent woodland forms part of the wildlife habitat network, as well as being an urban green space. The ecology officers expressed concern that in the absence of a preliminary ecological survey, it is not clear what impacts upon biodiversity might arise as a result of the development, including both the immediate impacts of building the new dwelling and possible impacts on, in terms of long-term tree loss. If there were no other planning objections to the granting of outline consent, it might be appropriate to seek a preliminary ecological survey at this stage, but it is planning officer's view that the site is unsuitable for residential development for the reasons already set out. Since it is uncertain whether the development would be able to deliver biodiversity net gain, as required by current legislation, policy LP 30 and principle 9 of the House Builders Design Guide, this should therefore be added as a third reason for refusal. In conclusion, it is considered that the site is not capable of accommodating a dwelling in such a way as to provide an acceptable standard of amenity for future occupants and to ensure that no valuable trees are lost as a direct or indirect result, or that it would be able to deliver biodiversity net gain. It is therefore recommended the application be refused for reasons of visual amenity, impact on trees and impact on ecology as set out in the officer's report and update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, William. First speaker is the agent, Matthew Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Addressing the point of lack of light, the method used to determine shading in residential properties from trees is BS 5837. Our arboriculturist has calculated 2 locations on the proposed front elevation on the ground floor. Both locations achieve 81 and 69 points in summer and 83 and 77 points in the winter. The BRE guidance states if calculations are greater than 65 points, then a conventional window design will usually give reasonable light. Therefore, although there is a slight effect on light, the building is well within acceptable BRE and British standard limits. Policy LP 24D4 and Trees and Design Action Group guidance states trees can influence ambient temperatures around buildings by providing shading from the sun and shelter from dominant winds, and this can reduce energy usage for both heating and cooling. This is very beneficial with the anticipated effects of climate change. The House Builders Design Guide SPD, paragraph 130F of the NPPF and policy LP24I states that development should aim to create places which are of positive impact on health and well-being, with a high standard of amenity for current and future users. It's well known that trees can have a positive effect on health and well-being. To address the tree root objection, the location and impact of the existing tree roots have been assessed in accordance with British Standards 5837 by a fully qualified arboriculturist. It is believed that the tree roots are actually very unlikely to be found underneath the existing building. The proposed building would actually be further away from the trees than the existing and would therefore provide additional space for the existing trees to flourish. In summary, I would urge the committee to approve the application on the grounds of the BS 5837. The calculations clearly show that there is no negative effect of shading from the trees. The proposed scheme is in accordance with the Kirklees House Building Guidance, paragraph 130 of the NPPF and LP24D4 and LP24I of the local plan. Kirklees local plan also refers to guidance which states if shading from trees does not have a negative impact, then it should instead be considered as a benefit because it provides a reduced need to heat or cool a dwelling, which is also compliant to the new overheating building regulations part O. These benefits which derive as a result of shading from the trees are also referred to in paragraph 131 of the NPPF. The proposals will provide a greater volume of soil available for the tree roots than existing, and it will therefore be of a benefit to the health of all the existing trees. Falling detritus from trees can easily be dealt with as recommended in British standards using leaf guards, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to the committee then for comments. Councillor Davis.
Some questions really. Lots of various aspects of British standards and various other things being quoted. And Councillor Burke has raised the issue of saying that calculations, various communications are proven by calculations of British standards that the planning concerns are not valid. I'd really like some clarification because I'm sure probably other members of the panel are the same. I'm confused because the information we've been provided by yourself and officers seemed fairly clear, but there seems to be a direct contradiction to that, or am I getting that wrong? Could you clarify that, particularly over this issue, of light in particular?
Yes, through your chair, in response to Councillor Davis's question, I did raise this matter with our own council arboriculturalist, who raised the point that even if the degree of light reduction that the trees cause now is within acceptable levels, the trees are expected to increase in size, which is likely to increase their impact on light with time, as well as there are other possible nuisance issues with the trees being so close, such as debris fall, and especially the fall of honeydew, the sticky residue that sycamores shed in the summer. So while two different arboriculturalists are entitled to reach alternative views, it is my view and consider the evidence that there would be long-term conflicts with the trees. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments? Councillor Homewood.
Yeah, I think it was another one which was good to be on the site and actually see what the orientation was like. I mean, my feeling, obviously in the pictures there, that's in the winter time, but it did to me feel very oppressive in terms of the tree shading and very close to those trees, and they were going over the site. To be honest, I'd struggle to think of a place that felt to me like less suited really to have a house built there in terms of the amenity of the person that people that would be living there. So I understand the different debates, but I think based on what I've heard and what I've seen on the site, I'd move that we follow the officer's recommendation to refuse this one, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Homewood. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, again, it shows the value of site visits. Having been there, as Councillor Homewood said this morning, you know, I have to concur with his views. It's very much in a dip there. You know, there was certainly, in terms of road noise, that was in itself quite oppressive. But it's not just that. It's the actual level of it, the embankment, and obviously the trees as well. I think it would be very difficult to say, you know, in terms of well-being, that any property developed there would have that sort of outlook and light within the building, which would create well-being and good well-being for its occupants. So I certainly am got an issue in terms of seconding that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Any further comments? Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. Richard.
Okay, so we're voting for refusal as outlined in the submitted report and also in the planning update. So if we start with Councillor Lukic.
For.
Councillor Firth.
For.
Councillor McGuinn.
For.
Councillor Lee Richards.
For refusal.
Councillor Marchington.
For.
Councillor Armour.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Hawkins.
For.
Councillor Lawson.
Against.
Councillor Homewood.
For.
Councillor Allah.
For.
Okay, so that application has been refused.
Thank you, Richard. Next application, page 77, All Biggin Farm.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Katie Chu, Case Officer for this application, which is 2022/91154, and this is for the demolition of existing dwelling and erection of detached dwelling, including landscaping and tennis court at Old Biggin in New Mill. The application has been brought to Planning Committee today as it measures 0.87 hectares and it's proposing fewer than 61 residential units. So this is the site as existing. It's within the green belt and it's within the Home Valley Neighbourhood Development Plan area. There are public right-of-ways to the north, the south and the east. We've received one objection on this, and this relates to the removal of a right-of-way. The objector states they have used this for over 100 years, but following receipt of this representation, the applicant's agent confirmed this access does not relate to a designated public right-of-way and therefore is being dealt with outside of the application as a civil matter. This is the site as existing. As you can see, a large detached dwelling is there. There's also free accesses into the site, which you probably saw today on site visits. So this is to the front, within the middle and to the rear. Looking at the site as proposed, so we've got again a new replacement large detached dwelling. The front and rear access are to remain and the middle is to be removed. This is due to it being unsafe. Around the property there's quite a bit of hard standing that doesn't exist at the moment in these patio areas and the seating area here. We've also got a new tennis court and a septic tank to be installed. As you can see from the red circles, there's quite a lot of trees that are to be removed. These aren't TPO'd. Looking at the existing and proposed front and rear elevations, as you can see, the existing dwelling is majority made of single-storey elements with just a small two-storey element in the middle. When looking at the proposed dwelling, it relates to a 2 3-storey property with more modern additions in terms of these glazed gable ends, which are to the front and rear. You may also note that there's quite a lot of excavation proposed at basement level to create this new level down here that doesn't currently exist. Oh, what's going on here? No, just right down. Oh, sorry about that. Moving on to the side. Looking at the existing and proposed side elevations, again you can see the massing and the modern gable elevations, albeit they are smaller in scale here. The side elevations are also useful because you can see the proposed patio area to the rear, and there's also the basement drop, which is just over 3 metres here. Looking at the existing floor plans, members will be aware of the update. There has been some confusion over how these measurements have been calculated. I'm just going to run through how I've calculated these, just to provide some clarity. So in this instance, to create the footprint of the existing building, I've gone from the ground floor and measured all the way around the edges, including the external elevations, which gives me a gross external area of 393 square metres. In terms of floor space, I've taken the ground floor and the first floor, again including these external elevations, and that's resulted in a floor space of 512 square metres. In respect of volume, I've taken the single and two-storey elements separately, and we've measured from the ground floor to the eaves, and then the eaves to the ridge, divided that by 2, and it gives you the roof space, which is equated in a volume of approximately 1,885 cubic metres. Whilst these calculations do differ from those outlined within the submitted design and access statement and planning statement, of which the applicant highlights the existing footprint is 422 square metres and there's a volume of 1,700 cubic metres, officers have undertaken these measurements against the submitted drawings, which should be to scale and in this instance should be 1 to 100. Following discussions with the applicant's agent, it has also come to light that the property does benefit from an existing basement level, although no floor plans have been provided to outline how big this basement is. I've been informed that it includes a swimming pool plant and a cellar, although you might not be able to see it, this little elevation here, on the floor plan, is actually a swimming pool, so it has been included within my calculations and has been taken into consideration in these calculations to the left. In terms of the cellar and the swimming pool plant, obviously we're not sure how big that's going to be, but when you look on the next slide, I think it's likely to agree that it wouldn't be as big as the basement that's going to be proposed. I would also just like to flag members' attention to how much of the property as existing is single storey in height compared to the two-storey elements. When looking at the proposed floor plans, the dwelling is to be 2 storeys but does include a partially subterranean basement level. The basement level has been used as the measure to propose as the proposed footprint of the dwelling, which equates to approximately 453 square metres. This would result in an increase of around 13.25% when compared to the existing dwelling. Whilst the applicant's agent does believe the basement level should not form the footprint of the property as it would be located below ground, officers are of the opinion that this partially subterranean element would still be visible to the south and should not be exempt from our calculations. A floor space which includes basement, ground floor and first floor have also been calculated, and this would see an increase of around 420 square metres. This would be an increase of around 82.1% and a volume of approximately 3,012 cubic metres, which would result in an increase of around 59.75%. In addition, it is noted within the design and access statement that a schedule of accommodation has been provided. This outlines each room within the property and the floor area to be provided. These figures do appear to be correct when measuring the gross internal area. However, it is noted that portions of the basement levels, such as this large garage and the swimming pool and then this storage room here, have been missed from the calculations. If measured from this schedule of accommodation, the basement level would equate to 225 square metres, but when you add the garage, the swimming pool and the storage room, it would result in a floor area of 407.14 square metres. The hallway at first floor has also been missed, and this would equate to approximately 36 square metres. However, I do note that in the planning statement, they have provided a gross external area of 906 square metres, and this includes the basement. This is not significantly different to the calculations made by officers on the submitted plans, and therefore we would say that it supports the calculations within the committee report. As the site is located in the Greenbelt, officers have undertaken an assessment of the proposals against relevant national and local planning policy. The full assessment is outlined within paragraphs 10.9 to 1041 of the committee report. However, to summarise, Policy LP59 Criterion B outlines that the complete redevelopment of brownfield sites in the Greenbelt would be acceptable if the extent of the existing footprint is not exceeded. Taking into account the above calculations, officers have concluded that the footprint would be exceeded and therefore would not be in accordance with LP59. Policy LP57 states the replacement of dwellings must be in the same use but not materially larger. Whilst it is in the same use, officers would like to emphasise that an assessment as to whether the replacement building is materially larger should not solely be an arithmetic exercise, it should also be a visual assessment. Officers have concluded that the dwelling would be materially larger, volumetrically but also from a visual perspective. This is stated within 10.20 of the committee report. Whilst the footprint of the proposed dwelling may not be substantially larger, a large amount of the existing dwelling is only single storey in height, whilst the majority of the proposed replacement dwelling would be 2 to 3 storeys and would include those bulky gable projections. In addition, a new tennis court is proposed, so therefore it has been assessed against LP 56. It is concluded the proposals would result in the loss of numerous large mature trees and would subsequently be covered with a permeable full-size tennis court. Officers considered this element of the scheme to significantly alter the existing character and visual appearance, making the site more suburban with such an open countryside location, thus harming the openness of the greenbelt and encroaching into open countryside. The proposals are therefore also considered to be contrary to LP 56. Moving on to design, I'll just go back to the elevations. Officers concluded the proposed dwelling, by reason of its overall scale, massing and incongruous design, its proposed untraditional and bulky glazed gable projections and green oak canopy, alongside all the extensive engineering works to provide a tennis court, basement level and hard surfacing, would result in an overly dominant dwelling that caused detrimental harm to the rural character of the area. Therefore, the proposal is considered to be contrary to both local and national policy. Officers have no concerns with regards to residential amenity, as the property is somewhat isolated. Highway officers have raised no concerns subject to the standard conditions in terms of surfacing and drainage. Trees officers have not raised objections, but they do query the proposed one-to-one tree replacement strategy. They believe more trees should be planted and that a tree protection plan be submitted. The applicant's agent confirmed that a large portion of the site is not available for tree planting, as it is used for a farmer to grow hay for livestock. Officers considered that a one-to-one tree replacement strategy in this instance may be sufficient, and that a tree protection plan could be secured by condition if planning permission is granted. Finally, the ecology officer has no objections but would require the installation of an integral back box and the need for further ecological surveys if permission is granted. Whilst I know members have been out on site, I've just got a couple of photos. So this is the front of elevation as existing. It's quite traditional in appearance. You can see the single storey elements. This is the west elevation of the property. This is views from the garden looking to the west and also the view of the south elevation. This is, when you stand in front of the property, this is where the proposed tennis court would be. You've got your front, rear and middle access. The middle access is the one that's to be blocked up due to it being unsafe. These are your views from Cold Hill Lane and up the public right-of-way where you can just see the dwelling poking through the trees there. It's therefore concluded, officers' recommendation is to refuse the application, and this is due to impact on the openness and encroachment into the green belt, as well as concerns with the proposed dwelling's overall scale, massing, incongruous design, and the extensive engineering works, excavation and hard surfacing. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. We have one speaker, the agent, Maria Daichala.
Thank you, Chair. The proposed development is for a replacement dwelling to be located at the site that has been in residential use for circa 150 years. Officers consider that the proposed dwelling will be materially larger than the existing dwelling and therefore spatially have a greater impact upon the openness of the greenbelt than the existing property. However, based on the calculations carried out by the project architect using architectural modelling software, the footprint of the proposed building will be reduced by 102 square metres. We understand that the Council based the calculations provided within the officer's report on a basement level which is not visible above the ground. As development within a greenbelt is assessed on its impact on openness, visual and spatial impact, it is considered that the building footprint visible above the ground will be the most appropriate for consideration. The entire basement level is hidden below ground, only revealing itself with a partial elevation. Therefore, we believe that it is unreasonable to include the entire level in a footprint calculations. Another clarification point relates to the officer's report referring to the proposed dwelling as being 3-storey high. Whilst the proposed dwelling will include 3 floors of accommodation, the property will appear 2-storey high at its highest point due to the inclusion of the partially visible subterranean level. We would also like to use this opportunity to clarify that the case law referred to in officer's report relates to a permanent replacement of a mobile home and other movable structures, which cannot be compared with a replacement of an existing permanent dwelling, which is in fact permitted by the MPPF paragraph 149.d. In regard to the proposed tennis court, paragraph 149.b of the MPPF confirms that the development of facilities for outdoor sports, such as tennis courts, is considered not inappropriate development in a green belt. In terms of its visual impact, the tennis court will not be visible from outside of the site and will be situated within a site with a well-established residential use. It is also considered that the office's statement that the court will encroach onto the open countryside is incorrect. Notwithstanding that, the applicants will be happy to remove the tennis court from their proposals if the members would be minded to support the replacement dwelling, as the applicant's key focus is on securing planning permission for the future home. The existing dwelling currently has 2 gables, and these features have been translated into the new property to ensure that the proposed scheme is in keeping with the existing dwelling. Therefore, these features are not considered to be intrusive. Furthermore, large gable windows on 2-storey properties are not uncommon in this part of Home Valley, and a closest example of such features can be found at neighbouring New Biggin Farm, shown in the images shared with the members. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Members, over to the committee. Councillor Lukic.
Thank you, Chair. I think both sides have sort of made the points very well. Overall, I agree with our officers' assessments about the impact on the green belt. Again, it's very useful to go to the site this morning and see how the existing dwelling sits in its setting and does very much have a single-storey appearance from many aspects, which isn't replicated by the proposed replacement dwelling. So the visual impact and impact on the openness of the green belt seems quite significant to me, to make it to have a significant harm on the openness of the green belt. So I'd be quite happy to propose the recommendation for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Lukic. Councillor Davies.
Yeah, quite similar comments, I think, to Councillor Lukic. Firstly, it's good to see that the applicant has already shown willingness to make changes in terms of the tennis court. I think for me, having been on the site, it seems to me fairly obvious in terms of the size and in particular for me the design as well is inappropriate for a number of the reasons that Councillor Lukic and officers have outlined anyway. Certainly, when you look at the current building and its setting, and then look at the proposed design, it's certainly, I would agree with officers' comments, that it is inappropriate. So I think it would need a fundamental redesign if there was going to be resubmitted or brought back to this committee as such. I certainly am happy to second the proposal as well.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Firth.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I know this place very well, actually. Some distant relations of mine actually lived there in the 1800s. And it's always, to me, been a rather nice building. It's had a lot of extensions, but the extensions have all been put on. They've all merged with the original buildings. I count the single-decker buildings, by the way, house a swimming pool, I do believe. I don't know what the people around them think, but anything other than the building that's already there, anything larger would take away the area and the looks of the area from that planning point of view. Hilltop Farm and Windsor Farm, which are across from there, I don't know what their situation is, but I certainly would propose that it gets left alone because there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's a well-built building. Apparently it's over 150 years old. I would say it's a bit older than that. And I've got to say, if that building stood and looks as good as it does now after 150 years, then it deserves to be left alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Is there any further comments from the committee? We have a mover and a seconder for the officer's recommendation to refuse. Richard?
Yep, so we're voting on refusal as outlined in the submitted report. So, Councillor Lukic?
For.
Councillor Firth?
For.
Councillor McGuinn?
For.
Councillor Lee Richards?
For.
Councillor Marchington?
For.
Councillor Arnoir.
Against.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Hawkins.
For.
Councillor Lawson.
For.
Councillor Homewood.
For.
Councillor Allah.
For.
Okay, so that application has been refused.
Thank you. The next application, page 103, Dorchester Road.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Again, I'm case officer for this application. So this application relates to 15 Dorchester Road in Fixby, which is seeking planning permission for the erection of a 2-storey side extension and a single-storey rear extension. The application has been brought to committee at the request of Councillor Pinnock, who considers the size of the extensions and the impact on visual amenity to be acceptable. Here is the location plan and site plan. The site is situated within a residential area and is unallocated on the Kirklees local plan. Here are the existing elevations and floor plans. The property is considered to be the original property is considered to be the 2-storey dwelling and the attached garage. The conservatory to the rear is a later addition. Here are the proposed elevations. The side elevation would be 6.3 metres in width by 8.7 metres in depth with an overall height of 8.5 metres. It is important to note that the width of the side extension is only 1 metre less than the whole width of the entire existing property, whereby the SPD states that side extensions should be visually smaller in relation to the original house. Coupled with this, the single-storey rear extension would have a projection of 5.5 metres, a width of 9.4 metres and an overall height of 3.7 metres. The side extension, as shown on screen, would also benefit from a flat roof element which can be seen here and on the side elevation there. To the rear, so it would benefit from a flat roof and then it will go into a hip. To the rear, the extension will benefit from a lean-to, which will further project out into a gable. Materials would be stonework and render to match. Here are some photos of the site. This is the existing front elevation on this photo here, and then this is just a photo taken to the nearest property at number 17, so the extension would sit here. This is just a photo to show the rear elevation, so as mentioned, this was a later addition, and then this just shows the relationship again, which the built form would have with the neighbouring property. Lastly, this is just a photo to the rear of the site, so there's substantial screening in place, and this is just a photo taken from street view, just to show that the property sits centrally within its plot. Here is the existing and proposed site plans. The yellow denotes what officers considered to be the original dwelling. In terms of the site's history, a similar application was submitted to the Council in 2021 and was refused by officers due to the substantial bulk and massing proposed, resulting in the works failing to appear subservient to the host dwelling. This decision was appealed and the appeal was subsequently dismissed. The Inspector's appeal decision can be found within paragraphs 10.4 to 10.5 of the committee report. This is a significant material consideration for this application. As such, officers still have significant concerns regarding the size and scale of the development posed, as it would not appear subservient to the host property, resulting in the original dwelling being lost. This would detrimentally impact upon the character and setting of the dwelling within the area, failing to accord with Policy LP24 of the Kirklees Local Plan, Principles 1 and 2 of the SPD, and Chapter 12 of the MPPF. A smaller scheme was suggested to the agent, however, no amendments to this effect were received other than the removal of the dormer windows. In terms of residential amenity, there would be some impact upon the neighbour at number 17 as shown on the photos. However, this is not considered to be undue. A full assessment can be found within the committee report. In terms of highways, if the built form could be supported, an acceptable level of on-site parking is likely to be able to be achieved. 4 representations have been received as part of this application, and these have been covered within the Officers' Committee report. As such, officers are recommending a refusal as the original concerns raised as part of the previous application have not been overcome. These are the size, scale and design of the extensions, which would appear discordant and incongruous within the application site and wider area, failing to appear subservient to the existing built form. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellie. We have 2 speakers. The first one is the applicant, Mr. Gurpreet Sandhu.
I would like to first admit that this application has put a lot of stress on me and my family because we really need this extension. The house is not big enough for a family of 6. My household includes my family of 4 and also my elderly parents who live with me. The house is not big enough. I bought this house because I believed that we would be able to grow into it and enjoy the last few years of my parents. I simply can't afford to move them out. They need help on a day-to-day basis, and it's imperative for my growing family that my parents that we increase the size of the house. I also believe that, in my opinion, the planner has not communicated with us at all. In the first application, the planner put forward a sketch including a central dormer on the 2nd floor. We then went back to the planner and met every requirement they wanted. So I can't understand why when we followed every amendment that it was rejected, and I was told that it needed to be even smaller in the second submission. I would like to add that the houses on my street are on a very large scale. I personally believe that I have also always tried my ultimate best to work with the planning team, and I hope that obviously on the site visit you can see that the house is 2 doors on, is on the same footprint as mine, and they've gone right to the boundary. Andy.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is the agent.
He's got nothing to add. He doesn't want to speak.
Got nothing to add. Okay, then it's over to the committee for any comments that you'd like to make. Councillor Lukic and then Councillor Davis.
Yes, quick question. Firstly, obviously sympathise very much with the family situation. We have to make our decision based on the plans in front of us, of course, and the rules and so on surrounding that. My question is about something that was just mentioned actually about other dwellings on the street and whether they might have made similar extensions. And can I just confirm, has that been looked at, whether there's been any other sorts of extensions surrounding this that may have set a precedent for that neighbourhood? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Julia Stedman, the Group Leader in Development Management. I suppose in terms of the comparison with other sites within the proximity of the application site, I'd just like to sort of read out an extract as part of the appeal decision. So as part of that, it was taken into account when the appeal decision came forward. So where it states there at paragraph 5 is that the appellant has drawn my attention to local examples of planning approvals for extensions. However, I consider that these are not directly comparable, principally in terms of the scale of the development proposed. I therefore attribute minimal weight to these examples in the consideration of this appeal. So that's been a further material planning consideration when considering this current application that's now being submitted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, we're sympathetic to the applicant's domestic arrangements and issues, and particularly what he's outlined in terms of his elderly parents. However, unfortunately, it seems to me very clear from what we saw today and from the information we have here and from the previous appeal that the sheer size of this extension of the additional building work is far too big. I think the design could be something that could be worked on, but for me it is simply the scale and size. And then from talking to the officers, I'm aware there was some negotiation. I think the applicant pointed to some negotiation of reducing the size, and I would certainly encourage that further. But from my perspective, I certainly would support the officer's recommendation on this and second and move that forward very much on that basis of size and scale.
Thank you, Councillor Davis, Councillor Hawkins, and then Councillor Homewood.
Yes, thank you. Echo Councillor Davies' comments there, and would like to second the proposal that we move to the vote on this. Yeah, it's looking at based on the rejection last time and the appeal, the sheer size of the extension looks to have not changed greatly between the previous application and now, and yeah, that's the main concerns I share with my colleagues here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Homewood.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to say that I think what's difficult in this area is that there's a range of different detached properties, different sizes of properties. Also, I'd say that generally the large properties on relatively small plot sizes, I'd say, for the size of the properties that are there. So I think there's quite a few factors, and so looking at other properties doesn't tell us directly what the size of those properties was originally and what the plot size is. So, my feeling is that given what's been said in the previous appeal, I can't see any reason that we would not support the officer recommendation on this. Now, I know there's been a discussion around not being able to have, for whatever reason, we've not come to some sort of been able to discuss what might be possible on the site, because clearly it is possible for there to be a reasonable extension on that property. But I know we've had previous applications of the same case officer where applicants have said they've been able to come to an agreement and have a discussion on those points. So I'm not quite sure what's gone wrong in this case, but I think it just say maybe to the applicant and agent that there will be a way that you can look at a scheme that would be suitable that the committee could approve in the future. But I think I agree with my colleagues on this one. When the clear direction and we've had an appeal dismissed already, I don't see how we can deviate from that.
Thank you, Councillor Homewood. Is there any further comments? Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder for the officer's recommendation. Shall we move to the vote, Richard?
Just before we go to vote, can I just get clarification from Councillor Armour? You missed the presentation and you missed, obviously, the representation made by the applicant. Are you intending to vote? Because okay, that's fine. Yes, I think that would be sensible. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so this is to vote to refuse the application in line with the submitted report. So Councillor Lukic? For. Councillor Firth?
For.
Councillor McGuinn?
For.
Councillor Lee Richards?
For.
Councillor Marchington?
For.
Councillor Davis?
For.
Councillor Hawkins?
For.
Councillor Lawson?
For.
Councillor Homewood?
For.
Councillor Haller?
For.
Okay, so that recommendation has been approved, so it's to refuse the application.
Thank you, Richard. We'll be having a short adjournment for a few minutes. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, committee. We're back, ready to go. Brief break. Councillor has left the chair because he can't take part in this item. So we'll move on to this item. It's 17 Mead Street, item 18. Is it John? Hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. My name is John Holmes and I'm presenting this application on behalf of Laura Yeadon, who is the case officer. Members have been asked to consider a proposal for the construction of a first floor extension and insertion of flat roof dormers to the front and rear roof slopes. This application is brought to this committee at the request of Councillor Sokol. This slide shows the front and rear elevations as existing and proposed. The red highlighted section represents the first floor extension. The grey highlighted sections the proposed dormers. This slide shows the side elevations as existing and proposed. Again, the red being the first floor extension and the grey highlighted being the proposed dormers. This shows the existing layout of the property. And this shows the layout as proposed. The proposal would increase the length of bedroom 2 and lead to an additional 3 bedrooms, making a total of 5 bedrooms within the property. I should point out 2 of these would be within the loft conversion and at the second floor level. So these photos show the front of the property and the wider street scene. And this photo shows the rear of the property. Windows to the rear of the adjoining dwelling, which I can try and highlight here with this cursor. So you can see these windows here. They would be immediately adjacent to the proposed first floor extension, which would go above this existing ground floor element of the host property, which is here. So the first floor extension would be above an extension approved in 2007. The site is unallocated within Kirklees local plan and no representations from members of the public have been received. Consultees listed in the committee report have not raised objection. The proposal is considered to lead to a development which would have a negative visual impact that would harm the character of the wider locality and the existing dwelling. And in addition, the first floor extension to rear would have a detrimental impact upon the amenity of the adjoining neighbour, leading to an unacceptable level of overshadowing and being unduly overbearing and oppressive. The recommendation for this application is therefore refusal for the 2 reasons detailed within the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we have one speaker, who's the applicant, Zafar Ali. Mr. Ali, you've got 3 minutes to speak. If you got.
Thank you. Good afternoon. May I take this opportunity to thank you, Chair and members of the panel, for allowing to me speak this afternoon. Dear committee members, I want to extend the property to meet the needs of my large family members, as I cannot afford to buy a big house. The rear of the proposed make this less visible and does not overshadow neighboring properties. Also, it is not overdeveloped. Appearance is not out of character to other properties. There are many examples of the front dormers in the nearby areas, and front proposed dormer is with the planning policy. In terms of the rear extension, I want to extend the full width as existing ground floor extension. If first floor extension to be offsetted front from left and right, then there will be huge cost to alter an existing extension roof. I request you as members of this planning committee to approve my application. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Members, over to you. Councillor Davies.
Again, I think make the comment that the site visit today was extremely useful because it gave us a view on the context of the building in the street. And albeit I know that there are some properties in that area with dormers, certainly this in that row of houses that wasn't the case. I think when we went around the rear of the building, it became very evident that the scale of this extension would not be appropriate, and simply looking at the overshadowing and the light issues with the neighbours, and also the visual impact, it certainly seemed to me to back up the officer's comments, and from my perspective, I would support officer's recommendation on this proposal.
You happy to move that?
Sorry, I'm happy to move it, yes.
Great. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. I want to second the proposal to proceed there. Very sympathetic to the applicant's family situation there, but yes, much the same theme of this committee, much the same as Councillor Davies. I share the concerns about the impact on the rear of the property. It's quite a big extension, particularly in terms of height, and yeah, I think that will be very problematic for the neighbour in the area. So yeah, seconding.
Thank you. Is anybody else have any comments? Councillor Anwar.
Yeah, just a question for the planning officers. Has the next door neighbour put any objections in?
No, there's no representation from any neighbour in the street, including the adjoining neighbour.
Okay, so we've had proposed and seconded to refuse the application as per the officer's recommendation. So I think Richard will go to the vote on that.
That's fine. So this is to vote to refuse the application in line with the information in the submitted report. So Councillor Lukic.
For.
Councillor Firth.
For.
Councillor McGuinn.
For.
Councillor Lee Richards.
For.
Councillor Marchington. Councillor Armour.
Against.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Hawkins.
For.
Councillor Lawson.
For.
Councillor Homewood. For. Okay, so that's been carried. So the application has been refused in line with the submitted recommendation.
Thank you. That's the end of the meeting, everybody. You can go.